The grand chamber of Cathar Prime was a cavern of sculpted obsidian and captured starlight. Pillars, so vast they seemed to be the very bones of the world, rose into a vaulted darkness where holographic constellations swirled in a slow, majestic dance, mimicking the celestial movements of the hegemony's thousand-sun domain. At the heart of this cavern, upon a dais of polished iridium, sat High Lord Valerius, his ancient form draped in robes of woven light, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the starfire above. The air was cold, heavy with the weight of millennia, and thick with a silence that was not peace but a prelude to a storm. Before him, suspended in the gravitic field of the council floor, stood the two pillars of his reign. Strategos Kalin, his carapace a burnished copper, his posture rigid with martial certainty, and emissary Lyra, her slender form cloaked in the deep blues of the diplomatic corps, her gaze fixed on the swirling data stream that hung between them. This data stream was the source of the storm. It was a simple, infuriatingly sparse projection, a single sphere of blue and white, a star of unremarkable output, and a collection of outbound signals that were as crude as they were persistent. It was the icon of the species that called itself humanity. "They are an infestation," Strategos Kalin's voice boomed, the resonance of it a physical force in the chamber. "A nascent plague spreading from a single, forgotten star system. Their expansion is chaotic, unguided by tradition or divine mandate. They spill into the Viridian expanse, a region declared a strategic buffer by this council for 10,000 cycles. They ignore our demarcations. They ignore our broadcasted warnings. Their silence is not born of wisdom but of ignorance." He gestured a clawed hand toward the projection. "Look at their vessels, asymmetrical, utilitarian, devoid of any aesthetic grace. They are built for function, not for glory. They are the tools of artisans, not the chariots of warriors. We have analyzed their energy signatures. Primitive fission, crude fusion. Their weapons are kinetic, chemical, the tools of barbarians throwing rocks at one another. To allow them a foothold in the expanse is to invite cosmic vermin into the sacred halls of this hegemony." Emissary Lyra did not immediately counter. Her silence was a different kind, a thoughtful, measured quiet that always irritated the strategos. She watched the human star, the insignificant Sol, and the faint lines representing their expansion. It was slow, hesitant, yet inexorable. "Their expansion is not chaotic, strategos," she said finally, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the echoes of Kalin's pronouncement. "It is methodical. They do not conquer. They do not radiate signals of glorious subjugation as we did in our nascent days. They explore. They build outposts. They observe. The worlds they settle are, by our own classification, marginal, unworthy of hegemony resources." "Unworthiness is not the issue, emissary," Kalin snapped, his mandibles clicking with impatience. "It is the principle. The expanse is a lock. They are the unwelcome key. To permit this is to show weakness. To show weakness is to invite challenges from every lesser race that still dreams of defying our ascendancy." High Lord Valerius shifted on his throne, a sound like grinding stone that drew both their attentions. "The emissary has a point, Kalin. Their behavior is anomalous. When the Xylos Collective breached the Outer Rim, their broadcasts were filled with boasts and threats. When the Sentinels of Gore made their stand, their fleets were a blaze of glorious defiance. These humans, they are quiet. They answer our warnings with simple acknowledgments of receipt, and then they continue. What is the psychology of a species that sees a wall and does not seek to smash it, but to silently flow around it?" Lyra's form seemed to lean into the data stream, as if she could absorb understanding through proximity alone. "That is the question that gives me pause, High Lord. Arrogance we understand. Fear we understand. Defiance is a language we speak fluently. But this quiet persistence, it feels less like a challenge and more like an inevitability, as if they are a tide, unconcerned with the stones on the shore. We sent a scout drone to their nearest outpost, a station orbiting a lifeless gas giant. They did not fire upon it. They scanned it, identified its origin, and then sent us a message." She manipulated the projection, and a new data packet bloomed in the air. It was a string of complex mathematics, elegant and pure. It was not a threat nor a plea. It was a correction to our faster-than-light travel equations, a minor one, an improvement of a decimal point of a percentage in efficiency. But it was a correction nonetheless. It was a message that said, "We see you. We understand your technology, and here we are better." Kalin let out a low, guttural laugh, a sound O. F contempt that echoed unpleasantly in the hallowed chamber. "A parlor trick, a mathematical bauble to distract us. They show us a clever equation while their clumsy ships infest our space. Do not be mesmerized by their trinkets, emissary. A predator does not need to understand the mathematics of its prey's flight. It only needs to be faster and stronger. We are faster. We are stronger. The hegemony has endured for 100,000 cycles. We have crushed empires that spanned galaxies while these humans were still chipping flint in their muddy caves. Their history is a blink of an eye. Their power is an illusion. And yet, Lyra countered, her voice dropping, drawing the focus of the room inward. In that blink of an eye, they have mastered technologies that took other races millennia to perfect. Their communications are encrypted with a layered complexity that our finest cryptographers have yet to breach. We only know they are there because of the carrier waves. We know their engine signatures are primitive, yet their ships move with an agility that suggests a mastery of inertial dampening far beyond the theoretical limits of such drives. There is a disconnect between what we see and what we observe, a profound contradiction. The High Lord's ancient eyes narrowed. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of civilizations. He understood that the greatest threats were never the loudest. They were the ones that grew in the silence, in the contradictions. "What do you propose, emissary?" "A direct, formal dialogue," Lyra stated. "We dispatch a diplomatic vessel to their primary colony in the Expanse. We present our ultimatum not as a broadcasted threat, but as a formal declaration from one sovereign power to another. We give them the chance to withdraw with dignity. We learn who they are, what they want. We assess their true nature before we commit the fleets." Kalen slammed a fist onto the holographic console before him, causing the star maps to shimmer violently. "Diplomacy, dignity. They are ants, and you propose we negotiate the path of our stride. No, we send a fleet, a grand fleet. We arrive in the Viridian system, and we present our ultimatum. If they do not immediately dismantle their colonies and retreat behind their designated border, we will do it for them. We will burn their settlements from the face of their new worlds. We will leave a scar in their history that will teach them the meaning of consequence. That is the language of power. It is the only language that will be understood. It is the language of the hegemony." The chamber fell silent again. Valerius considered the two paths. Lyra S. was the path of caution, of intellect. It was subtle but carried the risk of misinterpretation, of appearing weak. Kalen's was the path of tradition, of overwhelming force. It was the Cathar way, the path that had forged their empire from the fires of 1,000 wars. In times of uncertainty, tradition was a comforting fortress. "Strategos Kalen's counsel holds the weight of our history," the High Lord declared, his voice a final judgment. "We have built our peace on the foundation of unquestionable strength. To deviate now would be to undermine that very foundation. You will assemble the fleet, Strategos, a demonstration of our resolve. Position them at the edge of the Viridian system. Transmit one final ultimatum. Grant them one of their solar cycles to comply. If they do not—" He let the words hang, the implication as heavy as a dying star. Kalen bowed low, a gesture of triumphant loyalty. "It will be done, High Lord. They will learn their place." Lyra did not bow. She simply watched the icon of the small blue world, a feeling of profound dread coiling in her gut. It was not a fear of the humans, but a fear for her own people. They were striding into the dark, armed with the arrogance of 1,000 victories, utterly blind to the possibility that this time the darkness might stare back. She feared they were about to make a mistake that could not be unwritten from the stars. The Cathar armada that translated into the Viridian expanse was a sight of terrible grandeur, a manifestation of the hegemony's soul. These were not mere vessels, they were mobile monuments of conquest. Their hulls were a dark, metallic gold, etched with the epic histories of their lineage. Protrusions like cathedral spires and fortress buttresses bristled with weapon emplacements, each one capable of cracking a continent. Engines burned with the contained fury of captive stars, leaving shimmering wounds in the fabric of spacetime. It was a fleet built to inspire awe and terror in equal measure, a statement of power so absolute that the act of resistance was rendered insane. At its heart was the asterisk will of Valerius Asterisk, Kalen's flagship, a vessel so vast it eclipsed the system's primary star as it moved into high orbit over the nascent human colony. From the command dais of his flag, IP Strategos Kalen watched the planet below. It was a green and blue world, unremarkable but for the fledgling scars of settlement visible on its main continent. Small, geometric cities, a space elevator, a spindly, fragile thing. The sensor readings confirmed his initial assessment. Minimal orbital defenses, no warships in sight. Just a smattering of freighters and civilian shuttles that scattered like startled herd beasts as his fleet blotted out their sky. He felt a surge of triumphant vindication. This was not a power, this was an infestation, and he was the cure. "Transmit the ultimatum," he commanded, his voice ringing with the authority of his station. "Full hegemony frequency, encrypt it with their own primitive mathematics as a sign of our largesse. Let there be no misunderstanding." The message was sent. It was simple, brutal, and clear. Dismantle all settlements. Vacate the system. Cede all claims to the Veridian expanse. Failure to comply within one standard rotation of the planet below would result in total orbital purification. They were not offered negotiation. They were offered a choice between exile and annihilation. Kalen settled into his command throne, prepared for the expected response. First would come silence, then panic. Then, perhaps, a desperate plea for mercy or a foolish, defiant broadcast. He watched the chronometer. He savored the stretching moments, the feeling of an entire species' fate resting in the palm of his hand. It was the ultimate expression of Cathar philosophy, the strong dictate reality to the weak. Hours passed. The human colony below continued its routine, the lights of its cities tracing the same patterns. The freighters had moved to a safe distance but had not fled the system. There was no panic. There was only a disquieting, unnerving silence. Kalen's commanders grew restless. The lack of a response was in itself a form of defiance. It was an insult. Then a signal came, not from the planet but from the void, from the direction of human territory. It was a single, low-energy transmission. "Report," Kalen barked at his communications officer. The officer hesitated, his mandibles twitching in confusion. "Strategos, they have acknowledged the ultimatum. They say they are sending a representative to discuss the matter." Kalen leaned forward. "A representative? A diplomatic vessel?" "Just one, Strategos, a single ship. They have given us its designation, the UNS Odyssey. It is en route, estimated arrival 4 of their hours." A ripple of disbelief spread across the bridge. It was followed by a wave of derisive laughter, starting with the junior officers and quickly reaching the command dais itself. Kalen threw his head back and let out a booming laugh that was part mockery, part relief. The tension shattered. They were not defiant. They were insane. They were sending a single ship to face down an armada that had humbled empires. It was the most pathetic, desperate gamble he had ever witnessed. It was not even a gamble, it was a plea. They were sending a sacrificial lamb to beg for terms. "One ship," he mused aloud, a cruel smile spreading across his features. "They are more pathetic than I imagined. They must believe we are capable of mercy, a fatal miscalculation." He turned to his tactical officer. "When this Odyssey arrives, surround it, tractor it if it deviates. Let them see the cage we have built for them. We will hear their pleas, and then we will deliver our answer with fire and light." The arrival of the UNS Odyssey was an anticlimax so profound it bordered on comedy. It emerged from its faster-than-light transit not with a thunderous rupture of space-time, but with a silent, graceful shimmer, like a phantom coalescing from the void. The ship was small, impossibly so. It was a sleek, featureless spindle of a material that was a flat, non-reflective black, absorbing the light of the nearby star. It had no visible weapon ports, no shields shimmering on its hull, no grand spires or intimidating architecture. It looked less like a vessel and more like a sculpted piece of the void itself. It was an aesthetic of pure, unadorned function, and to the Cathar it was an object of utter contempt. As ordered, a wing of Cathar destroyers, each one dwarfing the Odyssey, moved to intercept, forming a brutal sphere of gilded metal around the tiny human vessel. On the main viewscreen of the asterisk will of Valerius Asterisk, the image was almost laughable, a single black seed held in the grasp of a golden claw. "They have stopped," the tactical officer reported. "Holding position. No energy readings of note. Their drive is cold. Minimal life support signatures." "Open a channel," Kalen commanded, rising from his throne to stand before the screen, a titan ready to address an insect. "Let us hear the squeaking of this mouse." The screen flickered and an image resolved. It was not a grand chamber or an armored bridge. It was a simple, sterile white room, seated at a plain black table was a single human female. She was of average size, her hair pulled back from a face that was calm, etched with a quiet intelligence. She wore a simple dark blue uniform devoid of medals or ornamentation. Behind her there was nothing but a blank white wall. There were no frantic aides, no glowering guards. She was utterly, profoundly alone. "I am Strategos Kalen, commander of this hegemony fleet and voice of High Lord Valerius," Kalen boomed, his voice amplified to convey his immense authority. "You are addressing the rightful arbiters of this space. You will identify yourself and state your plea." The human female met his gaze without a flicker of fear. Her eyes were a calm, steady gray. When she spoke, her voice was even, uninflected by emotion, but carried a strange resonance through the ship's speakers. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova of the United Nations, Saul. I am here to represent the interests of humanity. And I am not here to plead Strategos. I am here to offer you the same choice you offered us, to withdraw with dignity or to face the consequences." A stunned silence fell over the bridge of the asterisk will of Valerius Asterisk. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of the statement was so far beyond their comprehension that for a moment they could only process it as a translation error. Kalen's face contorted, first in confusion, then in a mask of pure fury. The laughter that had filled the bridge hours before now died in their throats, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. "You dare!" Kalen's voice was a low, dangerous growl. "You dare threaten the hegemony? Look at your screen, ambassador. Look at the power arrayed against your single, pathetic vessel. We can atomize you with a stray thought. Your world, your colonies, your entire species exists at this moment because we have allowed it. You speak of consequences. You are a child threatening a mountain with a pebble." Ambassador Rostova did not raise her voice. She did not change her expression. She simply held his gaze. "The scale of a tool does not determine its effectiveness, strategos. It seems your culture values size and ornamentation as a measure of power. We do not. Our philosophy is one of efficiency, of precision. We do not build mountains to crush insects. We engineer a solution precisely for the problem at hand." She paused, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in her posture. "This vessel, the Odyssey, is not a warship. It is a tool of last resort. Its purpose is not to wage war, but to end it. Your fleet is a magnificent, terrifying instrument of destruction, but its design is based on principles of energy projection and kinetic force that we have moved beyond." Kalen had heard enough. This was not delusion. It was an intolerable insult. This creature, this human, was mocking him, mocking the hegemony, mocking 1,000 centuries of glorious conquest. He would make an example of her ship, and of her entire species. "Your time for talk is over," he snarled. "Tactical, power all forward batteries, target that ship. On my command." "Strategos," Rostova's voice cut in, still impossibly calm, but now with a new edge, a sliver of something that might have been regret. "I must urge you, for the sake of your crews, for the sake of the future between our peoples, do not do this. You do not understand what you are about to unleash. This is your final opportunity to disengage." "There is nothing to understand but your own extinction," Kalen roared. He raised his hand to give the signal. This was the moment, the culmination of his philosophy, the ultimate expression of Cathar might. "Fire!" The command was given. Across the fleet, colossal energy conduits glowed, focusing arrays hummed with unimaginable power and kinetic launchers charged. For a fraction of a second, the space around the Odyssey was set to become a storm of pure, annihilating energy. But the storm never came. In the instant Kalen's command was uttered, before the first Cathar weapon could discharge, something happened. It was not an explosion. It was not a flash of light or a wave of energy. It was a change. A fundamental, terrifying alteration of reality centered on the human ship. From the bridge of the will of Valerius *, the view screen showed the Odyssey amid a barely visible shimmer, a distortion in the fabric of space itself, like heat haze over a black desert. It was a pulse of nothing. It had no energy signature, no mass. It simply was. And then the fleet died. It happened in absolute, profound silence. The Cathar destroyer to the Odyssey *''s port side, a vessel bristling with cannonades, did not explode. Its drive core, a miniature sun burning deep within its armored heart, simply went out. The intricate systems that maintained its fusion reaction collapsed in a nanosecond. The ship went dark, its lights flickering out as if its soul had been extinguished. It became a dead, floating hulk of metal, all its energy, all its potential, all its purpose gone. Simultaneously, the destroyer on the opposite side suffered the same fate, and the one above, and the one below. A wave of this silent, invisible negation expanded outward from the Odyssey. It was not an area of effect blast, it was precise, targeted. One by one, in a domino-like cascade of stunning speed, the warships of the Cathar Armada were neutralized. Their engines went cold, their weapon systems went dark, their life support failed. The contained stars at their hearts were snuffed out as easily as a candle in the wind. On the bridge of the will of Valerius *, chaos erupted. Officers screamed reports into their consoles. "Energy failure on the blade of Cathar. She's dead in space. The fist of Valerius is not responding. All systems are offline. It's the entire forward squadron. They're all dark." Kalen stood frozen, his mind unable to process the sensory input. He saw his grand fleet, his instruments of glory, being disabled, neutered, unmade before his very eyes. There were no explosions, no debris fields, no flashes of dying reactors. It was a clean, sterile, and utterly horrifying annihilation of function. It was as if a god had reached out and simply turned them off. The wave of negation washed over his own flagship. Alarms blared for a single, jarring second before they too were silenced. The majestic glow of the command dais faded to a dull emergency red. The main view screen died, replaced by the ship's unpowered, transparent canopy, showing the starfield in its raw, unfiltered glory. The hum of the life support system, a sound so constant it had been part of his existence, ceased, replaced by the terrifying, profound silence of a tomb. They were adrift, powerless. A gilded coffin in the void, only one light remained. A small secondary communications screen powered by a last-resort chemical battery flickered to life. On it was the face of Ambassador Eva Rostova. Her expression was unchanged. The serene, almost sorrowful calm was still there. Behind her, the white room was as pristine as ever. "As I said, strategos," her voice was the only sound in the dead silence of the bridge. "We did not seek this conflict. Our systems detected the charge-up of your weapons and initiated a targeted gravitic resonance cascade. It is not a weapon. It is a dampening field. It is designed to create a microsingularity within any active high-energy fusion source, causing it to collapse and cool instantaneously and safely. We have not destroyed your ships. We have simply turned them off. Your crews are alive, though their life support will be limited. We are already deploying automated drones to provide emergency power and sustenance to each vessel. We do not wish to see a single life lost." Kalen stared, his warrior's pride, his entire worldview shattered into a million pieces. They had not been defeated in battle. They had been corrected, like a misbehaving child whose toy had been taken away. The laughter that had echoed on this bridge now seemed a distant, foolish memory from another lifetime. It was the laughter of fools in the face of a power they could not even begin to comprehend. Rostova's calm, gray eyes held his. "The choice remains yours, Strategos Kalen. Your fleet is disabled. Your power here is an illusion. We can leave you adrift, or you can signal your High Lord and inform him that humanity is now ready to discuss the terms for a lasting peace. We are not conquerors, but we will not be threatened. We will not be caged, and we will not be underestimated again." The silence that followed was the sound of an empire's arrogance finally and utterly breaking. Back in the Grand Chamber on Cathar Prime, the news arrived not as a triumphant report of victory, but as a fractured, desperate plea from a single, crippled ship. The holographic display, once showing a fleet of glorious golden warships, now depicted a graveyard. A vast field of dark, silent vessels, floating impotently in the void, surrounded by a swarm of small, efficient human drones that moved between them like celestial morticians. At the center of it all, untouched and serene, hung the single black spindle of the UNS Odyssey. The chamber, once a place of absolute certainty, was now a vacuum of disbelief and horror. The assembled lords and counselors, the pillars of the hegemony, stared at the impossible sight, their multifaceted eyes wide with a dawning terror they had not felt in millennia. Strategos Kalen, his voice strained and broken, had relayed Ambassador Rostova's message. The words hung in the cold air, a death knell for an age of conquest. "We have not destroyed your ships. We have simply turned them off." It was a statement of power so profound, so far beyond their own understanding of warfare, that it rewrote the very laws of the universe for them. They had sent their greatest swords, and their enemy had responded by explaining that the concept of a sword was obsolete. High Lord Valerius S. And on his throne, his ancient form seeming to shrink, the weight of 100,000 years of tradition suddenly a crushing burden rather than a source of strength. He had sanctioned this. He had chosen the path of arrogance, and it had led his people to this moment of absolute bloodless humiliation. "Emissary Lyra," he finally spoke, his voice a dry whisper that seemed to crack the chamber's silence. "You will go." All eyes turned to her. Lyra, who had urged caution. Lyra, who had sensed the contradiction in the humans. She stood, her slender form now imbued with a terrible authority. "You will take my personal vessel," Valerius continued. "You will go to the Viridian Expanse. You will board this Odyssey. You will meet this Ambassador Rostova. You will listen. You will learn. And you will convey to them that the Cathar hegemony wishes to talk." It was the most difficult concession a High Lord of the Cathar had ever made. It was an admission of defeat, not of arms, but of philosophy. Lyra's journey to the Odyssey was a silent, somber pilgrimage through the graveyard of her people's pride. She passed the dead hulks of destroyers and cruisers, their golden hulls now looking like gaudy, hollow shells. The human drones, small and insect-like, paid her vessel no mind as they methodically attached temporary life support umbilicals to the Cathar ships, their movements efficient, impersonal, and deeply unnerving. The Asterisk Odyssey granted her permission to approach. A section of its seamless black hull dilated, opening an entryway into a brightly lit docking bay. The interior was as stark and minimalist as its exterior. There were no honor guards, no martial displays. There was only a single human figure waiting for her, dressed in the same simple blue uniform. It was not Ambassador Rostova, but a younger man with a calm, welcoming expression. "Emissary Lyra," he said, his voice modulated perfectly by a translation device. "I am Officer Jian Li. The ambassador is waiting for you. Welcome aboard the Odyssey." He led her through corridors that felt more like a scientific research facility or a place of meditation than a vessel of unimaginable power. The walls were a soft, glowing white. The air was clean and still. There was no hum of engines, no thrum of power conduits. There was only a profound and pervasive quiet. It was the quiet of absolute confidence. She was led into the same white room she had seen on the view screen. Ambassador Eva Rostova stood to greet her. In person, she was smaller than Lyra had imagined, yet her presence filled the space. Her calm was not a facade, it was an intrinsic part of her being. "Emissary Lyra," Rostova said with a slight inclination of her head. "Thank you for coming, please." She gestured to the plain black table. Lyra took a seat opposite her. For a long moment she did not speak, her mind struggling to reconcile the gentle civility of this encounter with the terrifying power that had been unleashed. "Your vessel," Lyra began, her voice hesitant. "What is it?" "It is a nexus of our understanding," Rostova replied, her hands resting calmly on the table. "It is a laboratory, a diplomatic outpost, and a guardian. Its primary function is to observe, to learn. Its secondary function, which you have witnessed, is to ensure a stable environment for that observation to continue." "You speak of it as if it is alive," Lyra murmured, studying the blank walls around them. "In a way it is," Rostova said. "It is an extension of our collective will. Humanity's history is violent, emissary. We spent millennia perfecting the art of killing one another. We burned our own world, poisoned our own skies. We learned the lessons of aggression the hard way. We stared into the abyss of self-annihilation, and at the last possible moment we chose a different path." She looked at Lyra, and for the first time Lyra saw a deep, ancient sadness in her eyes. It was the weariness of a species that had survived its own worst instincts. "We learned that true power is not the ability to destroy. Destruction is easy. It is the refuge of the simple-minded and the desperate. True power is the ability to control, to create, to de-escalate. We resolved that we would never again take a life if it could be avoided. Not an alien life, not even one of our own. So we focused our science not on bigger explosions, but on more precise and subtle applications of physics. The gravitic resonance cascade," Lyra said, the term Kalin had relayed. Rostova nodded. "A focused application of gravitational physics. It targets the specific quantum state of fusing plasma. It is harmless to organic matter, to ship hulls, to any system not actively engaged in a high-energy fusion reaction. It is the ultimate defensive measure. It removes the threat without causing harm. It is, to use an ancient term from our world, a way of turning swords into plowshares." The sheer ethical and technological chasm between their two cultures was laid bare in that statement. The Cathar built bigger swords. The humans had found a way to make swords irrelevant. "Why?" Lyra asked, the question rising from the core of her being. "Why did you not reveal this power? Why the pretense of weakness? You could have shown us this from the beginning and avoided this confrontation." "Because that emissary would have been a threat," Rostova explained patiently. "A demonstration of power to coerce a desired outcome. It would have been no different from you arriving with your fleet. We did not want to intimidate you. We wanted to understand you. We gave you every opportunity to choose a path of peace. We answered your warnings. We sent a single, non-threatening vessel. We opened a dialogue. We showed you respect. We had to wait for you to make the first move to demonstrate your irrefutable intent. Only then, when all other options had failed, were we ethically permitted to deploy a countermeasure." The logic was flawless, inescapable, and utterly alien. The humans were bound by a code of ethics so rigid, so deeply ingrained, that they would risk a confrontation with a vastly superior fleet rather than make the first aggressive move. They were not weak, they were disciplined. "What do you want from us?" Lyra asked, her voice small. "Our worlds, our technology, our submission?" A faint, sad smile touched Rostova's lips. "We want none of those things. We do not conquer, we do not rule. We have no interest in the hegemony's territory. We want what we offered from the start, a dialogue, an understanding. We want you to recognize our right to exist just as we recognize yours. We want a treaty that defines our borders not as walls to keep us apart, but as thresholds to be crossed with mutual respect. We want peace, emissary Lyra, a genuine peace built on understanding, not on the fear of annihilation." Over the following days, Lyra remained aboard the Odyssey Asterisk, a guest and a student. Rostova shared humanity's history, its art, its philosophy. She showed Lyra data streams of Earth, a world scarred by ancient wars but now vibrant and green, a testament to a species' ability to heal itself. She explained their political structure, a decentralized alliance of sovereign nations bound by a common charter of non-aggression and mutual defense. There was no emperor, no high lord. There was only consensus and a shared set of inviolable principles. The Cathar hegemony, in turn, was humbled. The initial terror gave way to a grudging, awe-filled respect. High Lord Valerius, guided by Lyra's increasingly urgent reports, formally accepted the humans' terms. The disabled fleet was slowly repaired by human drones, its crews kept alive and unharmed, and then it was permitted to return to Cathar Prime, a silent, gilded procession of shame and revelation. The story of the Viridian expanse spread through the hegemony like a shockwave, shattering old certainties and forcing a painful, necessary introspection that the Empire had not known in its long, proud history. A treaty was drafted, not on Cathar Prime, nor on a human world, but in the neutral space of the Viridian expanse aboard the Odyssey. High Lord Valerius, in an unprecedented move, came himself, meeting Ambassador Rostova in the same simple white room. They forged not just a cessation of hostilities, but the foundations of a genuine alliance. Humanity offered to share knowledge, medicine, environmental science, advanced materials, everything except the principles of their defensive technology. That, Rostova explained, was a burden they would bear alone, lest it be turned into a weapon by those who had not learned the terrible lessons they had. The alliance was formalized by the linking of their two primary communication networks, an act of unprecedented trust. The vast, ancient data archives of the Cathar were connected to the younger, more dynamic network of humanity, allowing for the free exchange of culture, science, and history. It was a moment of profound hope, a dawn of a new era of cooperation. It was during the final diagnostic of this data merger that the universe shifted once more. Lyra was standing with Rostova on the observation deck of the Odyssey Asterisk, a new addition to the vessel, a great dome of transparent material that looked out upon the star-dusted abyss. They were watching the data streams integrate, two rivers of light, one golden, one blue, flowing into one another to form a brilliant new current. It was a beautiful, symbolic sight. Then an alert chimed. It was not a Cathar alarm, nor a human one. It was a new sound, a synthesized tone created by the merged networks themselves, an emergent property of their union. On the main console, a new symbol appeared. It was a flag, a warning from the deepest, most ancient archives of the Cathar network, cross-referenced and amplified by the superior analytical power of the human systems. "What is it?" Lyra asked, a sudden chill running through her. Rostova was already at the console, her calm expression replaced by one of intense, focused concentration. Her fingers moved over the holographic interface, sifting through layers of data that were old beyond imagining. "It's an automated deep archive flag," she said, her voice tight. "A Cathar marker from before the hegemony was founded, from the time of the first ancestors. It was attached to a faint, repeating signal they detected coming from intergalactic space. The signal was too weak, too degraded for them to decipher. A signal from outside our galaxy?" Lyra stepped closer, her own heart beginning to beat faster. "We have never detected such a thing." "Your ancestors did," Rostova murmured, her eyes scanning the data. "But their technology couldn't clean the signal. They archived it as an anomaly, but now, with our combined processing power." She initiated a new decryption algorithm, a human-designed program that sifted through cosmic background noise with quantum precision. The two rivers of light on the main screen converged on the faint, ancient signal working together, their combined strength peeling away layers of eons-old interference. Slowly, a pattern emerged. It was not language. It was not mathematics. It was simpler, more universal. It was a sequence of stellar classifications, followed by a time signature and then a final, stark glyph. A star type, a date, and then silence. "It's a pattern," Rostova whispered, her face pale. "It lists a star, a G-class yellow dwarf, then a date billions of years ago, then it goes silent, then another star, an F-class white dwarf, a date, silence, again and again, hundreds of them, thousands." "A survey?" Lyra asked. "A catalog of some kind." "No," Rostova said, her voice barely audible. Her finger traced the final glyph that appeared after each sequence. It was a symbol of absolute negation, a void. "This isn't a catalog of stars that exist, it's a record of stars that have gone out." She brought up a galactic map, plotting the locations of the recorded extinctions. They were not random. They formed a distinct, horrifying pattern, a wave. A slow, inexorable tide of darkness, moving between the galaxies, originating from a point in the vast, empty void of intergalactic space. And it was moving in their direction. "The signal isn't a message," Rostova finally said, the weight of the discovery settling upon them both. "It's not a greeting from a lost civilization. It's a tombstone, a warning. Sent by a people so ancient they witnessed this phenomenon begin. They didn't have the power to stop it. All they could do was build a beacon to cry out into the dark. Something is extinguishing the stars." Lyra stared at the map, at the creeping edge of silent, starless space slowly advancing across the cosmic horizon. The conflict between the Cathar and humanity, the grand fleet, the ultimatums, the pride and the fear, it all seemed so small, so laughably insignificant in the face of this immense, silent threat. Their war had been a squabble between two children in a house whose foundations were crumbling. She looked at Rostova, the calm, thoughtful human who had humbled her entire civilization without firing a shot. She saw not a rival, not a conqueror, but a partner, an ally. Humanity's quiet strength, their profound ethical discipline, their mastery of physics, it was not just the philosophy of an enlightened species. It was perhaps the only thing that stood a chance against a darkness that consumed suns. "You said your ship's purpose was to ensure a stable environment," Lyra said, her voice filled with a new, terrifying clarity. Rostova nodded, her gaze fixed on the encroaching void on the star map. "It seems the environment we need to stabilize," she replied, her voice grim but resolute, "is larger than we ever imagined." In the quiet of the observation deck, surrounded by the infinite, beautiful, and suddenly terrifying expanse of the cosmos, the Cathar and the humans stood together, their nascent alliance no longer a matter of politics or diplomacy, but the first desperate line of defense for all life against the coming of the great silent night. The laughter had ended. The real war, the war for existence itself, had just begun.